Stay tuned, and at the end of our show today, I'll be sharing some of the upcoming events that Transform Via Travel is excited to be a part of.
Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean go solo live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. Today, we'll hear from Tatiana Bredikin, and she'll share about her solo travels around the Grand Canyon. I can't wait for you to hear about it, and welcome, Tatiana.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
I'm so excited to have you here today, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. I would love to hear, let's start by talking about the Grand Canyon. What drew you to the Grand Canyon?
Well, I live in Oregon, and we've got lots of beautiful rivers here, particularly the Rogue River. And so I had spent years inflatable kayaking and rowing on the Rogue River. And it's just the Grand Canyon is sort of the one that everybody talks about doing. It's the river to do. And so we had always said as friends that we would do it someday. And it hadn't happened yet.
Awesome. So someday is often one of those things of, yeah, we should go. I actually just spoke to someone today who someday said she was going to go see the ball drop in New York City for New Year's Eve. And now we're planning her trip, which is really exciting. So you turned that someday into a reality. What prompted you from taking that from a we should to we're going to, and now we did?
Well, for a little bit of a backup, when we first said we should do it, there was a 7-year wait list. And my friend who got on the wait list, I think it was 15 years before his name came up. And then I wasn't able to go on that trip with all those friends. So they switched over to a lottery. And there's a different way to get in now, but it is very difficult to do a private party trip. This is not like hiring a guide to go down. This is people going on their own. And one of the things, so my friends had gone, and several of them had gone several times. And one of the things that came up shortly before this trip was in March, my son had the opportunity to go. And he was invited and went on a trip in March. And I remember very wistfully thinking, oh, that's not going to happen in my life. My friends went, I'm getting older, I'm 55. But that's okay. I've done fabulous trips. And then in June, I was riding my bike home from town, as I do sometimes, just across from downtown. And I thought, let me swing by and see if Di's out in her garden. She's sort of on the way, about a block off. And I often think that and do that, and she's not in her garden, but this time she was. So I stopped and we visited, and after a while, her husband comes out and it's hot in the sun and he's talking. He says, there's an opening on a Grand Canyon trip leaving in about 10 days if you're interested. And we chatted. And this is the thing, even when people know they're going, they plan for a year, months and months of planning. And this one, he said, was leaving in 10 days. It was actually leaving in 5, I found out. But he said, give them a call. If you're interested, let me know and I'll give you their phone number. And I said, I'll think about it. And Dick said, well, don't think too long or somebody else will get that spot. So I rode my bike home thinking about it, and I called him immediately and started to get the ball rolling. And what happens is on these trips, just to give you the picture, you're rafting through the bottom of the Grand Canyon for 17 days. Completely self-supported trip. So to get very specific, you carry all your food in, you carry all your poop out.
Yes, that's specific.
So, so at any rate, you're with these people in a very close environment, basically, for a long period of time. And there's no getting out. It's not like you could I could ride my bike in a different direction or hop the next train. You are committed to being together. So there were some issues about inviting somebody that they didn't know. And they actually kind of checked my references, the reference of the person whose spot I got. He was injured. And I happened to know him. And he said, oh, she's great. And then, of course, the friend who told me about the trip. And they said, oh, yeah, she'll totally work. So they took a chance on me. And everything worked out. I got all the gear together in 5 days and headed out.
Okay, well, you're a very brave woman. So let's take a step back here. So I've done the Grand Canyon, but I
In a raft?
well, yeah, but it was definitely a private service, and yeah, it was concierge-ish type thing. So we're on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. And so let's start by saying there are a variety of ways to do the Grand Canyon. There's great experiences involved in all of them because the Grand Canyon is completely spectacular. However, you knew that you were prepared for an adventure like this because of all the other work you'd been doing, kayaking and rafting before this.
Oh, I would say that's a bit of an exaggeration on your part.
Tell me more. Tell me more.
So we did kayak, and the Rogue River is beautiful and very exciting and has class 4 rapids, actually class 5, but you don't have to go through that one. And then when my son was born, I realized that I didn't want to give up rafting or being on the river. So I knew I had to learn to raft. So he was in the water learning to swim before he was 3 months old. And I was learning how to row a raft. So we had done that. Usually we always went with friends. And I would say it was always the man who was the leader of the trip.
Okay.
And, we would be having a ball. The women are having a good old time. We're floating, we're laughing. And the men are like, come on, hurry up. We got to go. And, we got to get camp. We got to get the best spot on the river. We got to let's go. The sun's going down. We're like, why? So finally we came up with boating without boys and started doing women's trips.
Nice.
And so so again, we were learning how to row and we were doing our own trips and we realized, oh, we don't need them.
How was that different?
Oh my goodness. They wanted breakfast, they wanted to fuel up before the day. And we're like, oh, bread and fruit, baked bread and sweet bread and fruit gets us going. We just simplified things. We did what we wanted to do. We took our time. We stopped when we wanted to stop. We didn't feel rushed. It was completely different. And we felt so empowered and independent. It was great.
Big deal.
Yeah, it was a really fun transition. And that was many years ago. And then I hadn't been on the river for a while. I hadn't been on the river in a few years. But I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. The Grand Canyon rivers are generally rated class 1 through 5, 5 being pretty much considered unrunnable, although people do run them. The Grand Canyon, the water is so big, they have reclassified it 1 through 10.
Wow.
Big, big water. But people assured me as I was, kind of thinking about it and planning for it, that it was just different. There's a lot of maneuvering around rocks in the Rogue River, and I've done the Middle Fork of the Salmon. And so it's kind of more technical. You got to move a big boat like a barge and move it around rocks. Whereas in the Grand Canyon, there's many fewer rocks and just big, big water.
Wow. That's exciting.
Yeah. So we decided that I could handle it, but it was pretty scary.
So this group was a mixed group, though. It sounds like it was men and women?
Yes. Yes.
What was the dynamic?
So it was an interesting dynamic, and I think particularly because of my work in working with groups and seeing how people mesh and gel and struggle and come together. As it happened, it was a very mixed group, and there ended up being groups of people who knew each other from before, but it was almost like a reunion. So there were 2 couples that hadn't seen each other in years, and they were there, and there were another couple of couples that hadn't seen each other and were together. And I was the only person on the trip who knew no one.
Right.
So that was challenging for me.
So you were given 5 days notice to go on a 17-day trek, and you were going with basically strangers. So
Absolutely strangers, yes.
where were you in your life that, it allowed you this flexibility and you were ready to just pull that trigger when that opportunity came?
Yeah. Well, certainly I'm working for myself. So as it happened, I had a window where I didn't have any contracts right in that spot of time. So that was really a big part of it. My kids were, in high school and college, and just, yeah, it was one of those things. It was like do or die. Like, I'm going for it.
Well, you truly probably couldn't have planned it better.
No, I couldn't have. And I think the anxiety of thinking about it any longer than that might have done me in.
Well, and now, like you said, an excursion like this is a lot to plan for, and making sure that you're properly equipped and things like that. And I know, when I went with my friends and we did all sorts of research, even though we traveled with a reputable outfitter, we still had to make sure that we had all the right equipment for ourselves as well. So how did you do that scramble?
Um, I will say everything fell into place so easily. Literally, I made a phone call. Somebody said, you won't be able to get a boat. I made a phone call. There was a boat for rent. It was just piece after piece like that. On the very last day before it was time to go, when I was packing everything up, my one friend who I met in the garden, Di, she said, can I do anything to help you? And I just gave her a list of things to run down to Bi-Mart and grab for me, for little first aid things and stuff like that. So she was a huge help. And, I will go with divine intervention on this one.
Absolutely.
And I was speaking with my priest before I left, and I said, okay, Father, everything is falling into place, and this is a really scary trip. I'm just telling you that God will have to break both of my legs if he does not want me to go on this trip. And, my legs remained intact, so I got in the car.
There we go. So as you're going alone on this trip, in a way, because when I talk to people about solo travel, what you've just done is an example to me of solo travel. Yes, you were with a group, but you didn't bring any family members. You didn't bring any friends. You truly didn't really know these people at all. So, of course you become closer as you go through an experience like this, but have you done any solo travel before this?
I was thinking about it, and I actually have, but they were more with organized groups.
Okay.
So Bike Centennial used to do trips, and I did a 3-week bike trip with them, but that was with a leader. So we were self-supported, but that was with a leader. I traveled in Europe when I was younger a little bit. So yeah, that wasn't going off by myself, or being by myself wasn't really the huge issue. I think one of the hardest parts was sort of the support and the resources. Is that in this very stressful, very challenging situation, I really only had myself to rely on. It did not play out, in fact, that the group really gelled and became very bonded, as many groups I've been in do. I remember cycling in Europe and meeting people, and you feel like your best friends immediately. So I felt very much alone and very much responsible for myself. There was one man who was incredibly supportive, and I don't know what I would have done without him. But we would stop and scout a rapid, and he, I remember asking, well, what's the best way to go? And one person looked at me and said, you've got to figure that out for yourself. And I was rather in a panic. That was my first big rapid.
Wow.
And this one man, very kind, he said, well, let me tell you, they're going to go over there, and that's how they're going to do it. And this route, see right here through these rocks, or, on this side of those rocks, is the traditional way. And I'm going to go over here for this reason. And I said, okay, I understand. Like, I know now which is the way for me to go.
Well, now you have information that you can make a decision on.
Yes, yes.
That's really interesting. And I think when we talk to people who have joined groups like that, having an expectation or an understanding or things, I mean, it makes me call the question, like, would they have left you behind?
No, they would not leave me behind. And I certainly understand the logic behind it. If he had told me how to go, he could be somewhat responsible if I had trouble,
Fair enough.
you know? So it was just a different style that this other man had in helping me figure it out.
Okay.
And so for being, being a woman or being myself in a challenging situation, that was the first rapid that we scouted. So we get out and we look at the big rapids and kind of figure out what we're going to do. And I was so scared at that one that we were all headed back to the boats where we had left them on the side of the river when we walked down to scout the rapid. And I said, I'll be there in just a minute. And the boulders were so big. They were like, bigger than a room. And I walked behind a boulder and I kind of got underneath it and I just started to sob. I was so scared. I did not know how I was going to get through that. And I cried and cried and cried, I don't know, for maybe 5 minutes, 7 minutes. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay, here we go. Let's get up and do it.
Yep.
And, got over there, got in the boats. We went on through. It went fine.
Well, and that's a true example of if it scares you, do it anyway. But it's also about accepting this is fear. This is a legitimate fear.
Yeah.
And honoring that. and then processing my options are sort of limited because not doing the rapid wasn't a good option either.
No, it was not an option. And I will tell you that each rapid I went through, I realized I did the same thing. Each big one is I would just kind of like go off by myself and like cry for a minute. Or one time I was with one of the other women and I was like, I'm really scared. And it got less and less every single rapid as the rapids generally got bigger and I was less fearful.
So it was, they get bigger, you get small, an inverse relationship.
Yes, I became less and less fearful as the rapids got bigger and I had more experience.
You had more experience, you had more proof of success.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why when I take folks on these Go Solo Live challenge weekends to help them get baby steps and get comfortable with solo travel, and they've done public transportation for the first time, or they have dined alone for the first time, that's why I do that.
Uh-huh.
It's just another example of validation. Oh, I've done that before. I could do it again, or I could try this.
Right. I could figure it out. I could do something a little bit bigger next time. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But that's a prime example. And you were putting yourself in not harm's way, but you were putting yourself in a very challenging situation.
It was extremely challenging. Very, very challenging. And and pretty exciting too.
Well, so you had that feeling of triumph as well. So the fear was there, and then you got to celebrate.
Yes, absolutely. There's this woohoo feeling at the end of every rapid.
So if you had to think about your biggest accomplishment through this, was it that first rapid, or was it the biggest rapid, or what was it?
It was absolutely the biggest rapid. And that's called Lava Falls. You probably remember lava at the end. And we stood up on the rocks scouting it, and the trip leader's looking over and he's like, I don't see a way through this. And at this point, the person who was in my boat decided that he was not going to ride through that rapid. He was going to walk around.
Okay, so now we have an option.
Well, the boat has to get there. He had an option, but I was rowing the boat. I rowed he didn't row. I rowed the whole river myself. And so we went to the other side. We scouted the other side. Again, we kind of said, oh, okay, it looks like this will work from here. And there's a way and there's a plan, and we have an order that we go through in. And at that point, I had like 1 second of fear. I was like, ooh, this is scary. And that was it. That was it. I was completely calm and peaceful. And we went, and the person who always goes in front of me, we have a kind of a lineup for going through, he hit a wave sideways right at the top of the rapid, flipped his boat. So, and he didn't flip his boat. He was ejected from his boat. It was so powerful, it shot him out of the boat. And now everybody is paying attention and trying to figure out what to do. And is he okay? And keeping their eyes on him. I am at this point in the lineup, in the current, right behind him, going the exact same way that he went, because we had decided that was the best way to go.
And your experience in that boat is going to be entirely different because of the weight difference. Isn't that something?
That's very much something. That is very much something.
Okay.
Okay. So I thought, well, this is fine. He went too far to the right. I'll just go to the left. There's plenty of room over there. And I start pulling and pulling and pulling against this current, which I cannot describe how strong and powerful this water is. And I realize in an instant that he couldn't get out of the way because the water was carrying him right into this wave. And I felt the slam of that wave against my boat. It was like hitting a wall. Flipped my boat. I came up underneath the boat, which is actually a very safe place to be because you can breathe under there.
Right.
But it occurred to me that other people didn't know that I was okay. So let me tell you, I was as calm as I have ever been on this whole trip. I knew I was fine underneath that boat. So I got out and I waved to the people that I could see. This is at the top of a 1/4 mile long rapid. I wave and I am floating along, holding onto the boat, when I notice that we are heading towards the part of the rapid called Cheese Grater. Yeah. So I swim around to the other side of the boat and I start swimming and pulling this boat loaded with 17 days worth of gear to get out of the way of that rapid. And, you know, the rapids are they have so much air in the water that your flotation devices don't hold you up that much. So actually at some point I was not attached to the boat, and you're kind of breathing water because you can't get up above the rapid. But at any rate, I remained calm the whole time, took my boat, started swimming over to the side away from the direction of Cheese Grater, and got into the calm water. And I felt so protected and so safe that whole time that, again, it was only divine intervention. So I forget what your question was. It was something about the scariest rapid or the
accomplishment.
The accomplishment. So the accomplishment was that I think that's transformance, or the transition to trust, that I knew I was okay at the biggest rapid when I didn't know that at the beginning.
There's so much symbolism in this conversation right now. It's almost hard to know where to start. But it's hard because I feel like my listeners are missing out on so much by not being able to see the video, that they only get to listen to it, because the expression on your face as you're talking as well, you can see in some ways that you're going right back to the moment, but you're experiencing it, but you're also looking at it from the outside. And it's really wonderful to be able to see your expressions as you're going through that.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience.
So,
and yeah,
go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, and, you know, in 17 days, there was so much. It was not easy. And I think that's important, you know, to just kind of recognize that, yeah, you know, I tell you a highlight, I tell you a fun story. There were just many, many challenges.
Well, you've talked about the lack of support. Was that the hardest part?
For me, connection is really important. And that's what I create in my work, is I bring groups together, and even groups that are having challenges and difficulties, we find, I work with them to find what they have in common and their strength. That certainly was the most challenging part for me. but I would say even we were down there in record heat, which we found out after we got back, 119, 120 degrees. And the
Wow.
water was about 50 degrees.
Wow.
So, you want to cool off, you get hot. The rocks, the sun bakes on the rocks all day long. You get out of the water and it's like an oven in the sand when you're making up camp.
Yeah. Well, at least your clothes would dry each day. Is that the thing to?
Oh, yeah, you dry in seconds. I was pouring water on myself trying to stay wet.
Sure. Yeah. That's fascinating. Well, so one of the things that I talk about is how travel is so important in terms of your own personal growth and development. So if you had to pull any key lessons or growth from this experience, what might they be?
Um, yeah, I was thinking about that before we were getting on the call. And, I think that when I keep coming back to it is that self-reliance. I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to God on this trip, begging for mercy. Um, and, really singing the prayers. And, so on one hand, when I say, the really doing it myself and the self-reliance and the supporting myself emotionally, when I was very scared, of course I wasn't alone. And the people on the trip, without a doubt, were very, very kind. They were all very nice. And they just had other priorities than my sense of security.
Sure. Sure.
They were on their own trip with their friends.
Fair enough.
So for me, when I think about, I did that myself. And to be a 55-year-old woman who rode 120 miles and ran every single rapid herself it feels pretty remarkable to me.
Good.
People, you could walk around rapids if they didn't have to get their boat through. You could walk around a rapid, or the person with more experience would take the boat through. And I was doing that. And I do remember at the end, that story of lava that I told you, one of the men didn't realize that I was going alone. And he said afterwards, when I saw you going through that alone, he said, I couldn't believe it. He said, if I had known, and there were two people who said to me, one said, if I had known, I would have taken my boat through and come up and taken yours through. And the other person, the one who was always so helpful for me, he had said, you don't have to do this. I can take my boat through and walk back and take your boat through. And
Sure.
I said, no, I want to do this.
That's really impressive.
So there's something in there about that, learning to trust myself and what I can do.
So how might you recommend a trip like this? And that doesn't necessarily mean the rapids. It doesn't necessarily mean the Grand Canyon. It might mean being that solo person in a group. How would you recommend something like that in terms of personal growth for somebody else? How could it help somebody?
Well, I guess what I'm very much thinking of is how it would enable any of us to reach inside and find the ways that we can support ourselves. And every trip is going to be different, because I've been on plenty of trips where there's complete connection among the group and whatever. It's just a different dynamic. There's not a right or a wrong. It's just how things play out. So I guess that's what I would recommend it for is, if you want to know yourself deeply, and you want to find your own personal resources, taking any trip that feels like a stretch, as you talk about, going on I'm sure there are Grand Canyon trips, people who are scared on your trip.
Absolutely.
With a professional guide, or whatever it is, a bicycle trip or a tour group, to do something alone and have those times with yourself is very valuable.
Absolutely. And, we didn't even spend any time talking about just the impressiveness of the canyon. So we're talking about the rapids and the water,
Yeah.
but actually, a friend of mine just posted the first sunrise of 17 over the Grand Canyon. And I took my moment and I'm like, oh, I probably need to get back there and experience it, from a different perspective now.
Yeah.
But I don't think you never get the same trip. Even if you go
Mm.
to the same place, you
No.
never have the same trip. And I think that's so important as well. You're in a different place. The place is in a different place in a way.
Hmm.
It allows for acceptance of growth and change in everything as well. So I never, some people say, oh, I've been there, I never want to go back. And I kind of keep a running list of, oh, if I go back there, this is what I want to do or see the next time.
Hmm. Yeah, very much.
Do you have any trips on the horizon? What's next for you?
Um, I actually don't have anything specifically planned. So no, I guess if we talked about dream trips, how about that?
Absolutely.
I would like to ride my bike across the United States.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm, kind of putting it out there to a few likely candidates to go with me. But yeah,
Awesome.
that would be my dream trip.
That sounds crazy, amazing, wonderful, and all of those things. And so when that happens, because I have no doubt that you will make that happen, make sure that you keep us posted on the Transform Via Travel Facebook page or something so that
Oh,
we
okay.
can follow your travels. And
It'll be
maybe
a few years.
that's okay, but maybe there will be people along the path who would like to provide support.
Ooh, that sounds great. Yeah.
You never know. That could be
Thank you.
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I want to make sure you get a chance to do, Tatiana, is tell us a little bit more about your business, what allowed you some flexibility, and what's going on with your business. How can people find you?
Okay. Well, they can find me two ways. One is at my website, which is meetingmastery.com. And then, of course, we can also connect via LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn under
Perfect.
Tatiana Bredikin, and I am the only Tatiana Bredikin on the planet, so you won't have any trouble finding me.
Excellent.
So I'm a professional meeting facilitator and a strategic planner, and I specialize in higher productivity for bottom line results. So we get things done. Yeah, I help people to hear each other, make decisions, and move forward together. And I do that both in person and virtual meetings and strategic plans.
Excellent. So, if people want to find you, they can find you on LinkedIn, they can find you on your website.
Mhm.
And one of the things we had talked about earlier is that you also help people virtually with this as well as people in your local area.
That's right. So a lot more people are doing virtual meetings, and all the struggles that we have or that people can have in meetings are, just multiplied in a virtual meeting. The distractions and all the rest of that. So I really keep you focused and help you get things done effectively, efficiently, to meet your goals.
Sounds wonderful. Well, that's great. Anything else you want to share in closing?
Um, I think I'd just like to say, I think one of the things that I think about, which didn't really come up, but is a little bit how the parallel I see between the work that I do and the rivers that I love. And it really is that the power, I see the power of a group the way I see the power in the water. And the importance of, planning ahead and seeing what's coming and being flexible to move with what happens unexpectedly, working with undercurrents, all of that. And I just sort of love that flexibility combined with bringing out the strengths and the uniqueness of each person to make the group stronger. So I think that for me, that's just a really fun analogy between groups and rivers and accomplishments.
There's probably a blog post at minimum or a book
Oh, there we go.
in that analogy.
Yeah. So thank you, Jennifer. This has been just such a joy. I've really had a good time reliving the trip with you.
I really appreciate you taking the time to share this with us today. And as you go forth and whatever your travels bring, please make sure to share them with us.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thanks again, Tatiana. Wasn't it great to hear the stories that Tatiana shared with us today? It's important to remember that we are able to trust ourselves and take time to practice that. So we've reached the end of today's episode. I hope you've been enjoying our guests and that you can relate to their stories. The interaction doesn't have to stop there. Please reach out to me at jennifer@transformviatravel.com to share your thoughts and feedback. Reviews of Go Solo Live are welcomed and encouraged. Just go to wherever you found this podcast and post a review. If you're interested in being a guest on Go Solo Live in the future, please reach out to me. In today's episode, you heard me refer to the Go Solo Live weekend challenges. We're hosting those events several weekends throughout 2017. More information can be found at transformviatravel.com or www.facebook.com/transformviatravel. Please connect with us and get on the mailing list so I can keep you posted about those events and more that we have to offer for 2017.